Um, a lot of conversation took place around IQ, and everyone got carried away by what numbers should you be at if you're going to be a good leader, etc. And then we moved beyond that into emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence in its reality, in its infancy, which was in the 90s, was really two key things, really two absolute key. Was one, being able to recognize what was going on in you, how you were reacting, what was going on in your mind, how was your gut reacting to various triggers that might be going on. And so the second part was, yes, I can recognize it. What have I got as strategies to deal with that? Now, in my case, I was absolutely brilliant at hiding all my emotions, and yet deep down, I'm an extremely emotional person. I had a high need to be loved, even though I was a global corporate boss. And a lot of the time, I would come out of meetings not having spat the dummy or been suddenly away from what the way I wanted to communicate. And ultimately, my body ended up saying, we've had enough, boom. And I had a heart attack. And I had a heart attack at 54. And that was probably the greatest thing. I mean, I survived, so that was good. But it was probably the real great wake-up call and saying to myself, my God, I've got to start listening to all the stuff, all the mentors, all the coaches I've had, and start actually applying it. So let's go from where initially emotional intelligence was the only words we talked about. It's important, it's key that you actually know how to manage yourself and manage those feelings that you have, the inner child. But the next thing is emotional resilience. How many times don't you achieve what you'd like to achieve, but you have the ability to bounce back? How many times have you not got the promotion you wanted, or you have not achieved the goal that you wanted, but you end up thinking it through, not going into blame or going into the politics of why it happened, and start looking at how can I use the lessons that I've learned to make myself more resilient in the future without doing what I did to myself, harm by denying it. Now, one of the people, if you ever follow anything that I put on LinkedIn or on my website, there are several people who I absolutely admire. And one of them at the moment is a PhD, Susan David. And Susan David is in the coaching, Harvard University in the States Coaching Academy. But she also writes on her own behalf. She's a psychologist. And at the moment, she would be the leading person in terms of emotional agility. And what she's saying is if you have enough intelligence, forget numbers and quotients and everything else. If you have the ability to understand yourself and you have the interpersonal skills to be able to empathize and understand and listen to people, then you have good EI. It doesn't necessarily mean to say that you are agile enough with it. And she's got several things that I've been putting up and sharing her work because it's so enlightening. And she says, what happens when, let's say you wake up in a bad mood? We've all done it. We can't possibly put a definite reason for it. We wake up and we're not quite firing on all our barrels. And we go into work and we grumble at somebody or we ignore somebody. And before we know where we are, we've created a different space than we had before. In emotional agility, it's understanding we created that. How we react to other people's reactions is understanding where they're coming from. And the simple thing, like I've just said, let's say you go in the office, normally you're nice and bright and you recognize people. And the next time you go in the office, you walk straight past them, you don't even acknowledge them, and you expect them to feel the loving way they did the day before. They're not going to. They're going to have their own reactions to that. Emotional agility is how do you actually manage within your own frame of mind other people's emotional intelligence, other people's reactions or resilience or whatever it might be. So is it important in the chemistry check, if we move to that part of the first part of the question, is it important that when you're talking to somebody, you're tuning in to how they're communicating with you? Because ultimately, the role of real leadership, and I would also say business and executive coaching, is asking questions and listening and listening and asking another question by saying, tell me more. Why do you think that's important? What might happen if you don't do such and such a thing? So the chemistry check's important because you will see if somebody has strong needs. And in my case, I like to try and evaluate if somebody is being needy and looking for somebody to be almost there at the end of a bad week, that they want to dump on you and you're the person doing the sifting. That's not going to help the person grow. It's being able to help the person themselves identify what the issues are and come and say, this is what I did. I'm not sure if I should have done that, but, and whatever they're then going to explain.